careful, we are going back to the old days when people were, brought in.
They have not yet obeyed the court orders, because if they had obeyed the court orders, they would have released me on the bail of 50,000, which I posted yesterday. So the first thing we are going to do on Monday is to charge the police with obtaining money with false pretense, because they obtained my 50,000 on the pretense that they are going to release me, and that is a big issue, because now I have posted bail twice.
Impunity kumbe inaanza hapa, na ile kazi Matiang'i ameonyesha polisi wetu to disregard the law. Inakaa now there is a general lethargy in our systems, and especially our security systems.
Right, so let's just hear from Farah Maalim. We promised to circle back with him. Farah, continue.
Debarl, I think all the panelists here put it extremely well, very well. I mean, Senator Tiende Amolo, who is a major general, or should I call him a colonel in the struggle and basically how to deal with tear gases. The only thing I want to tell them is that Tiende Amolo was still in school when I was also being tear gassed in the early 90s. And I remember very well one thing that really we haven't found a way to deal with for all these years. I always used to call on my friends, members of parliament, and I'm talking about the luminaries of this liberation right now, the folks who are the so-called young Turks and everybody else in the early 90s. And I told them, gentlemen, as politicians, we show a very bad example to the country, and we will demonstrate that we are buckling under the power of that despotic state that time. Every time we take to our heels when we're tear gassed. And I told them, let's be clobbered, let's be tear gassed, let's have the consequences in there, but let's stay there. And invariably, almost always, the only leaders who used to be left behind, we used to be Raila, myself, and Muturi Kigano. I don't know if you know this former lawyer who is also, I think he's a member of parliament now. Muturi Kigano, an extremely courageous guy. And we used to be clobbered, of course, and tear gassed and the rest of it. So it's not a good sign for you to run as a member of parliament, as a leader from tear gas.
It's not a good sign.
It's not a good sign. It's a very bad sign. It's a very bad sign. You should stay and eat it and relax it. And I wouldn't say enjoy it, because it's a very bad thing. It happened to me one time when we went to many times, of course, but one of the times I remember very well. We were just passing by Wakulima. The first multi-party, the second after the repeal of Section 2A, the first multi-party parliament. And we decided we were going to have a prayer at Majengo, and then from Majengo we're going to go all the way to All Saints Cathedral. I can't remember one of these churches. It's called All Saints, is it?
Yes.
And when we were at Wakulima, we were approached now by the police. So they started clobbering us. And the first thing I noticed is that they picked Raila like a bag of maize and threw him into a Land Rover. And when I looked on both sides, I was alone, literally alone. And before that, we had so many members of parliament. But when I walked straight into the police officer and I told him, get out of my way, he stopped, he looked at me. I don't think he probably understood that I was a member of parliament, because that was my first time. Or I for one reason or the other. Or for a reason maybe even to appreciate that bravery itself. And he walked away and told me, Endelea. And that's when I realized our friends now coming from all sides, the public was the first to decide that they were not going to abandon their leader. And when they saw me walk in alone in that road, they came from all sides. A short while later, I saw all our good friends. You remember all our young Turks. I'm not going to mention names. And when I look at them, most of them are wearing sports shoes, which means they prepared themselves to run, which is a very bad sign. And of course, when that happened, the masses came to us and they decided it doesn't matter how much we're going to be clobbered, they will stick with us. And we went all the way to the church. So in a sense, when you want to fight, welcome to the club, those of you who are joining in. At that time, you're very young, most likely in primary school, I think, in 1990, 93, 92, 93, January. But of course, this struggle will never be won if we're not prepared to pay a price for it. This struggle will never be won if you think it's only relevant and matters when you are on the other side of the power, of the power itself. Because today, you have people who, for all intents and purposes, were involved in serious impunities in this country, complaining that the law is not being followed. Moses Kure is a very good friend of mine. One time when I was talking about this blanket punishment, collective punishment for Muslims because of Al-Shabaab, I remember he called for me to be killed and called me a terrorist. Basically saying kill him extrajudicially. We're just saying you cannot kill people extrajudicially. Today I'm not going to take that on him. I'll be there and I'll defend his rights to his free speech and his freedom to the hilt. But the reality of the matter is that we were there in those days, in the early 90s, and Kanu was on the other side. All of us were in the opposition. Ended up in the government one time or the other. We all ended up in the government. The Prime Minister was the Prime Minister one time. And when we talked about the renditions, the thing that we fought very hard, the rule of law. The Prime Minister told the Muslims, you can't talk about people being forcibly rendition from here. You can't see how many people have been killed, like those bombings in Kampala and the rest of it. But we said, what proof do you have that these people who were bombed by these guys, why don't you have a process? There's an extradition treaty between Kenya and Uganda. Let's go through the process. And let the courts, then of course pass that and let them be taken to the place. So what I'm trying to say is that regardless of who it is, I remember William Ruto, the deputy president, who of course right now is on the wrong side of the law, rather on the wrong side of the power, whichever way you want to look at it, were being tear gassed after the 2002 elections, and Kibaki was in power that time, and if you remember very well, that when he's wiping tear gas from his face with Nick Salat next to him, and then they're walking and he's saying the struggle will continue, it doesn't matter how much it takes. So shall we always have this kind of a cycle in which when you're in power, you exercise impunity to the hilt yourself. When you go out of power is when you talk about rights or how the law should be upheld and the rest of it. And then when you come again, it's the same thing. Because the same guys who were with me in 1992 are the ones who came to power at some stage down the line. So basically, I mean, this is one area that Miguna. I would rather, I'd be very happy to discuss Miguna. He's right, he's a Kenyan, everybody knows. But do you know, I mean, how do you travel, if I may ask, I stand to be corrected, I probably do not follow these issues very well, but how do you travel from a country to another country without a travel document? Even if it's a go home. Even if as a member of parliament you go to another country and you lose your passport, there's no way you can just walk into a plane and climb a plane and go to another destination. You go to your own mission, or the information is sent to the nearest mission, closest mission, and you are sent a document which is called go home. Because you could lose your passport in another country. But at the same time, well, Miguna, from the way I see it in the papers, I might be wrong, and I apologize if I'm wrong, Miguna wants to travel without any document, absolutely no documents. He will not be let through in the country of origin, the way you're coming from, and it doesn't work in any way. Today as we're talking, there are not less than 30,000 Kenyans from Northeastern Province who, during the drought of 1991, and the subsequent years again, went in and registered themselves as refugees to access the food because the government did not have food for them. And they've been fighting for the last 30 years to get their right to their own citizenship. Here we are, telling our own brother in the other end, just walk into the nearest, and he says, I'm not going to walk into anything, everybody knows I'm a Kenyan. And then you also have another Kenyan here who cannot get a job, he's finished school, he cannot go to university because his right to life, which was food, which he exercised in his own right and registered himself. And anybody would have done it. If you had a refugee camp in Muranga, everybody in Muranga would have registered themselves to go and get free food those days. But here it is, you're looking at more or less a form of an apartheid. I wouldn't call it that extreme apartheid. But we have that kind of a thing, which is simmering within the system itself, simmering within the populations. Increasingly, people are feeling left out of that, alienated. dispossessed of their own nationhood and integrity and their respect.
Thank you.
And those people are not going to sit back. This thing is going to explode one time or the other. And I'm talking about all over the country. Now, the way we are looking at it right now, and I think it's important that we uphold the rule of law. But the way we have, even in that short period we've been in politics ourselves, this very short 25, 30 years past, there's a change of guard all the time. And every time it was the same thing. So if you're asking me when shall we have a situation in which there's going to be a total respect for the rule of law, and it's going to be what you call that impersonal. Impersonal. You don't look at the person himself, but you look at the law itself. I don't know when it's going to come, but it's a long, long way, many generations to come, because every time some people get power. If you remember John Michuki one time when we pushed very hard for a change of the constitution, he said, what's the point of changing the constitution? Moi is out. So ideally, for him, it was get rid of Moi and get somebody from Central Province as the president. So once that is there, this constitution serves him right. And right served him very right. And of course, those impunities and that excesses at that time under Kibaki was there. It was done to many people. And Kibaki himself was such a gentleman. I think we will never get a president like him for a long time to come. I just hope so. But the system and the administration that was there was in certain instances rotten to the core. So basically, what we are looking at right now, what we are looking at right now is that if this thing is going to make a difference, if the BBI, I personally support the BBI for one reason only.
We want to gravitate into BBI just briefly, but it's not true what you're saying entirely that Miguna wants to travel without any documents at all.
That's what I said. I don't know about that. But what kind of a documents does he have?
But yeah, because they also
the impression given in the media is
the
that
ID is suffices now for him to travel
because
the government
is you cannot travel.
No. Because the case is the fact that the government is holding his passport, which currently, as it stands, has expired. So the only valid thing that he has is currently the ID.
An ID is not a travel document. You know, there are international regulations for these things. It's important for you to understand. And I'll tell you this because I know it. I'll give it to you.
They've been holding his passport. It has expired within the government's arms right now as it is. He is away from the country.
He can go to the nearest mission and apply for a passport and will be given a passport. That is the law anywhere in the world for anybody. If an American loses, if an American loses, let me just finish. If an American loses his passport here in Kenya, he will go to the nearest mission. And if there's no mission, there's always a counselor, what do you call services, offered by another mission. In the cases where there are no American embassies, like I think in Iran or somewhere else, they go to the British embassy there. And the